Bring the meeting to order. The City Council's agenda briefing. I will take a roll call at this time. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Here. Councilman Reinbach, you here? Councilman Anderson is absent and out of town on business. Councilmember Barnett is here. He's walking in the door. Councilmember Spears, are you here? Councilmember Spears? Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Waddell is not here, and the chair is here. So we do have a quorum. And at this time, we'll start off with C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution ratifying the contract amendment number 1 with the Reserves Network Incorporated for providing temporary staffing for stormwater services, maintenance staff, and this budget impact is $45,000. C3 is a resolution requesting the city clerk to investigate the sufficiency of a petition for annexation. PH1 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wilmington, North Carolina, approving an amendment to an installment financing contract in the amount not to exceed $30 million to finance streets and sidewalk projects, parks and recreation projects, the construction of a new fire station, and the construction of a sports complex, and providing for certain other related matters thereto. Ordinances. 01 is an ordinance appropriating to the general fund $1,619 of revenue recovered through the North Carolina Hazmat Regional Response Team contract with North Carolina Emergency Management. 02 is an ordinance appropriating $71,277 from the general fund road, race, and organized walk committed revenues to the municipal golf course fund for a feasibility study to improve the safety of the municipal golf course crossings on Pine Grove Drive. You can see that the budget impact is $71,277 as committed revenues. 03 is an ordinance amending various project and grant funds for adjustments and corrections from budget to actual funding and expenditures. 04 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $317,500 to the 17th Street Sidewalks Project from the Transportation Bonds Contingency Bike Ped Project. Sir, Mr. Rivenbark.
Somewhere in there I was reading it, it mentions going through the historic Oak Grove Cemetery.
We'll ask Richard Murphy to come forward and give us an explanation of your question, Mr. Rivenbark.
Morning.
Good morning.
Because that cemetery,
Mayor,
back when 17th and 16th Street were built, all those graves were relocated to Flemington. So there is no cemetery there. It may have once have been called that, but
Well, there still is a cemetery. The graves that were replaced was where the road went. So the cemetery is still on either side of Road 17. So there's the Oak Grove Cemetery is still there. And we actually did a GPR, ground penetration radar, to make sure the new sidewalk is going to meander through this Oak Grove Cemetery, so it won't disturb any of the existing graves. And then county is going to put historic signage through that walkway to explain the cemetery. So it does still exist. There's just no headstones or anything.
okay, thank you.
Item 05A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the Golden Leaf Foundation grant agreement in the amount of up to $250,000 to support the Clear Run Branch Drainage Improvement and Stream Restoration Project. And then 05B is the ordinance appropriating that money of $250,000 from the Golden Leaf Foundation grant award for the Clear Run Branch Drainage Improvement and Stream Restoration Project. Resolutions. R1 is a resolution adopting the March 2023 City of Wilmington Home ARP allocation plan. And then R2 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wilmington, North Carolina, authorizing the negotiation of an agreement to an installment financing contract in the amount not to exceed $70 million to finance the acquisition of a downtown campus, including a building, a parking deck, and related property, and providing for certain other related matters thereto.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mr. Waddell.
So I realize this is just the financial component, and so outside of the financial implications, there's some operational issues that some of the council members have brought up, including myself, but we haven't really had a forum to have that discussion. Would it be possible on Friday at our budget workshop to have an informational session on where we stand from a acquisition standpoint, and maybe then hash out some of those operational discussions there?
We won't be prepared to discuss all of the operational costs associated with that until we complete the facilities condition assessment. That won't be done until...
No, I realize our due diligence is long from completed, but maybe just, I mean, I know Chad's done a great job of giving us these weekly updates, but we haven't had a chance to discuss them, you know, as a group. And I think it would be beneficial to do so while we have everybody together and kind of talk through where we are from an updated standpoint. We typically get out of those budget workshops a couple hours early anyway.
And that's fine. If you just want an update as to where we stand at that point in time, I'd be glad to give you that snapshot.
Well, I think it'll give council members a chance to say, like, you know, we were having some discussion back and forth, but we can actually have it up, you know, all in a group in a workshop session. I think it'd be beneficial.
We'll add it to the agenda for the 31st.
Thank you.
And then R3 is a resolution providing approval of a multifamily housing facility to be known as Cape Fear Hotel Apartments in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina, and the financing thereof with multifamily housing revenue bonds issued by the Wilmington Housing Authority in an amount not to exceed $13,706,000. And then reports is RP1's council's appointments, committees for boards and commissions, and Councilmember Rivenbark will be giving us a report from that committee. This concludes this portion of the agenda. Mr. Manager, anything?
Mr. Mayor, we have 3 items to bring for you this morning. We'll start with a presentation from the USL with regard to some proposed uses of Legion Stadium. And Amy, are you going to introduce this for us? Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Mr. Christopher Mumford, who is the managing partner of USL 1 to Wilmington, will be giving this presentation to you this morning.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Mumford. Thank you all very much for your time today. I'd like to have a conversation about a stadium request for Legion. We have intentions of bringing professional soccer back to Wilmington. Wilmington has always punched above its weight when it comes to soccer, whether it's at the high school, college, and back in the day at the professional level. We're a very committed cohort of folks where actually Dwan Bader, who is our sporting director and head coach, was on that first team of the Wilmington Hammerheads many years ago. So I'm going to go through this presentation very quickly. Let me know if you have any questions. Oops. So I think the key feature to this, I teach design thinking and entrepreneurship at UNC Chapel Hill. So it's really important to understand what stakeholders and users want when you're doing projects of this scale, really of any scale. But we've spent a fair bit of time over the last 2 years talking to fans, players, prospective investors, as well as working with the municipality and really trying to figure out what would they like to create. And really from fans we hear they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And really what we're very interested in is the do good, do well legacy. So for those that are less familiar with soccer, soccer is enjoying probably the most unprecedented boom in U.S. history right now. We just had the World Cup in December. We will be hosting the World Cup, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico in 2026. There will be something called Copa America in 2024. And then in 2028, we'll have the LA Olympics, which will generate a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. So really the next 6 years are going to be a golden period for U.S. soccer. So have signed in with the United Soccer League. They have approximately 40 professional clubs across the country. We think that number is going to get close to 80 or 90 clubs in total. And there's going to be a window that opens and closes on the opportunity, and I really feel like Wilmington should be one of those cities that has a pro soccer team. Women's soccer is growing tremendously. College soccer, the whole pyramid of soccer is growing, and we want to make sure Wilmington is represented at the pinnacle. So if you look at the footprint, I won't go through all the details here, but some of the key takeaways is most of the growth is happening in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia. Kentucky, in fact, Knoxville and Lexington just launched their new season. Their locations in Richmond, Raleigh, Charlotte, Greenville, Charleston, as well as Statesboro. So much like minor league baseball was very big in the Carolinas, minor league soccer is growing dramatically in this area. Just to get a sense, there are already 15 teams here in North Carolina. Charlotte weighs in with the most, unsurprisingly. But the Triad is going to be coming in with one in High Point. Fayetteville has a indoor professional team, and Asheville and Boone, particularly Asheville, are looking to trade up to a professional league. So I would like to be one of those 15 teams or 16th team that ends up joining the North Carolina teams. So earlier I mentioned the key ingredients you need to pull a community asset off like this is a committed cohort, community interests, the youth club buy-in, which has been enormously important to us. Carson Porter, the executive director, which the city's been very supportive of, has been a great partner in this. And, you know, we want to understand the realities of the municipality, to understand what can and can't be done, because that's going to dictate what our investor support is. We're talking to investors, and they're keen to understand what, you know, what sort of solutions there are for the near and the long term. The league is very excited about Wilmington. This is a high-profile market that they want to be a part of. So in terms of our key principles, we want to change trajectories in sport, entertainment, and wellness. I teach at Carolina. I've been doing startups since 1998. Raised about $30 million worth of capital for various businesses. And I've been involved in education at the middle and high school level, started a school as well as in the higher ed level. What's integral to this project is an outdoor food hall to support a pro soccer team. It builds community, food builds community, and sport creates tribes. And we think that's going to be a really important combination. And it's going to be that thing that just makes Wilmington a little more different. So we do want to create a place where you feel like you belong. And the idea is that we want to build a community asset which is self-sustaining financially within 5 years. The notion of do good, do well is important to Duane and myself, where we're in our 50s now, and I think having those parallel goals are really important to us. So we met with the Legion Stadium Commission several months ago, and we understand that field renovations prior to 2024 have been recommended, not yet approved, but those are really important to us in terms of width of the field, the playing surface in order to move to the professional level. My sense is that other levels, including high school, are going to be very grateful for those improvements in the surfaces as it relates to injuries and just quality of playing experience. We did propose a food hall placement inside the stadium, and that was not very well received. So we offered a plan B, which was in the parking area, which again had its challenges. There were concerns about selling beer during high school games, particularly inside the stadium and the parking. We don't have any interest in selling beer inside high school games. So there was a proposal that we had, a counter proposal where we would consider moving to the fire tower area, which is currently being used to park excess equipment. It is a space that is, besides that utilization, not much is happening at all. So there was a proposal or discussion to potentially remove the tower, and the idea was if you put it beyond 2 fences, you would remove some of the beer sales concerns as it relates to any sort of high school events, as well as it would address some of the parking issues which are important for high school games. So the proposed location, just so you get a sense, we're looking in the back end there, and as we zoom in here, the idea is we would actually keep the fire tower because we think it has some character. So the name of the proposed area would be the Fire Tower Food Hall. It already has a concrete pad. We'd have a little bit of green space for games, and you know, we'd like to get an asphalt or crushed gravel parking area back there, and we just need to confirm that power, water, and sewer are there. Now, that area was used to practice putting out fires, so we're hopeful that much of that is available, but we'll need some confirmations on that. As far as the proposed offerings, what we'd like to do is have beverage containers, basically a coffee, beer, wine, and soda container, and then we'd have food kitchens, pizza, taco and burrito, burger and chicken, vegetarian, and salad, as well as a dessert. The idea is to partner with some local restaurateurs, as well as have 1 or 2 locations for folks that are graduating from the local culinary institutes and community college, and really try to create a pathway to the pros in culinary, because in my work with Rocky Mount, Nash, and Edgecombe County, we found that the food industry was a great way for low-resource folks to become successful entrepreneurs with minimal capital. There are some restroom issues we're going to have to deal with, whether it's portable or standard unit, and the tower would be used as cold and dry storage by all vendors. So here's a proposed container concepts. I won't go through all the details here, but we're working with a consultant. This whole shipping container food hall is flourishing across the world. You know, what's great about it is it's a community builder. It's a place where people want to spend time. We'll have outdoor screens for people to watch Premier League in the morning, Canes, Panthers, whoever in the afternoon, and the evenings take in a soccer game. We do want to have a small stage to support local musicians, and we'd like to figure out a way for local artists to showcase their art as they do down in Art Basel in Miami, just because while we don't think we can help them become full-time solopreneurs when it comes to musicians, helping local artists and musicians develop a good side hustle would be great. We do want to be a mural creator. You know, we'd like to finance murals that go up on our containers with the idea that they would ultimately be moved to different parts of the city, just because I think murals add some wonderful character to an otherwise fabulous city. So here are examples of what these units look like. And the shipping container park revolution is already happening. Sparkman's Wharf in the upper left-hand corner was one of the early ones. That place is packed on Saturday and Sundays with families. And I just think it's very much in alignment with the community asset we want to create here in Wilmington. We would like to put some VIP containers on the side of the stadium where there's the smaller grandstand as opposed to the larger. just because there, from a crowd control perspective, we think there are ways to keep teams on one side, and then we can have fans on the other side as well as on the inlines. So our stadium request is the following. We'd like to go ahead and see if we could get approval for the recommended renovations. You know, we do need really 70 yards wide, but 72 is our preference. We'd like to get some non-permanent paint markings to be used for different sports. We'd like to see some modest locker room improvements. We'd be happy to give you a tour of the existing locker rooms, but I think you're going to find that things have changed a fair bit over the years. Things like air conditioning, heat, some shower partitions, and just some new carpet and paint, as well as a video screen that we could use during halftime to brief the players. And then what we'd like to do is have rights to place the food hall at the fire tower with alcohol sales, the VIP containers. And mind you, the food hall and the VIP containers can all be picked up and removed. You know, our intention is to play at Legion Stadium for 2 to 3 years with the idea of finding a permanent location. And those are discussions that we're continuing to have. We'd like to be able to place modular offices and locker rooms if necessary. And then, of course, earlier I mentioned the water, sewer, electricity, and parking lot at the parking lot in the fire tower area there. So that's really all that I have for you. I'll open it up to see if y'all have any questions.
Just out of curiosity, what is the current width of the facility now? I know that was been a concern with pro teams, because I know you're asking for 72 yards, and that's a pro requirement.
Yeah.
But what is the width right now? Do we know?
In the wisdom of the Parks and Recs director, we checked again yesterday, and it looks like it does hit 70 acres, and it's possible to get to 71 or 72. So that looks like that is a possibility that we've confirmed yesterday.
And in the locker room area there, I guess at the end of, I guess it would be on the north end of the
That's correct.
facility, you're
Yeah.
asking for air conditioning, heat, shower, partitions, carpet paint.
Yeah, fairly modest space, so it wouldn't cost a lot for that.
Within that space.
That's correct.
And then the food hall is where the I guess the business side of it really kicks in.
Yeah, honestly, with 18 home dates in professional soccer, you have to have a way to generate income, and we think that something open 360 days that's family-oriented sports, basically an outdoor sports bar, but also something that cyclists and runners can use that space there.
Would you then use it for other things? I mean, obviously, would you build this food hall and then just for the 18 games, or would you?
No,
build the
we'd
food
like to
hall
do it for
365?
That's exactly right. We want to create another venue where people and families feel safe to enjoy food and spending time with other friends and family.
And do we have any kind of model or something that's already out there? I know you showed us some stuff in different places, but is there anything within the state that kind of mimics this?
Yeah, there's one in Research Triangle Park. It's called RTP Box Yard. There's already a little bit of a few containers in town. And I think there's something in Charlotte, so we can go ahead and share some of those in-state examples for you.
And you did check on water, sewer, electricity in the parking area at the fire tower?
Yeah, that's something that we'll need to follow up on just to confirm here.
Okay, very good. Sir?
Good morning, sir. Other than the fact that we have the facility, what are you looking to for this? What are you looking to us for, other than we have the stadium and the fire tower property? What involvement are you looking to us?
Well, we'd like to sign a 2 or 3 year stadium lease with you, and at this point, that's what our ask is. So is the rights for the food hall, the VIP containers, to place those modular offices and locker rooms if we need to, but we're not asking for any sort of capital or expenditures related to that.
What are the starting and ending times of your season?
Well, we've got a couple windows here. So U.S. Soccer requires by May 31st for us to say whether we're going to go or not go.
No, I didn't mean that.
Oh.
What is your playing dates? What is your season?
So typically, preseason will start in February and will end the first week of November if we're fortunate enough to make playoffs.
Okay.
So it's a pretty lengthy season.
Have you had any conversations with the local athletic director regarding
We have,
sharing
we've spoken with folks at the high school. We've spoken with, which is probably the primary points of interest, but we've also spoken to the youth clubs about how can we collaborate together on this.
Because that is a high school facility.
That is correct.
We've owned that. We were kind of forced into taking care of it for years and years until the commission was formed
Yeah.
in the late 90s. And it is, of course, we play a lot of sports
Sure.
on that field, and that's why we put the turf down. And
Yeah.
it's reached its life expectancy.
And,
So-
and we're so grateful that you guys have been keeping up that stadium because it creates this opportunity for us to bring a pro team back to Wilmington.
Okay. Thank you.
Tony, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. We just want to gauge council's interest in pursuing this further. The issue that we have that we're going to have to iron out is the conduct of business 360 days a year there, year round, simply because generally speaking, these kinds of amenities are associated with sporting events. And so there would have to be, if you're interested in pursuing this, we'd have to work out some sort of lease, and I'm not sure that we could do it, and I'm getting way out of my field, but I'm not sure we could do it exclusively with one entity without going through some sort of process. So there are a number of issues that would have to be worked out logistically. We're just trying to gauge interest of council in A, do you want to look at this kind of facility, and B, are you interested in allowing the alcohol sales to go on at the same time?
Okay, very good. Let me get to Mr. Barnett, and then I'm gonna come back to you.
I think Councilman Robinbach asked my question, which was relating to the high school, because they do use the field. I guess as a former, coach, one of the advantages to, if that school has that great field, their athletes will be healthier, because they're not going to get injured as much. And I don't know if there's anything you can do with that. But then also the other question I was going to ask was, you mentioned you only want it for 2 years, and then.
Yeah, what our takeaway is, as you know, I think ultimately we'd like to do a permanent location. But I suspect that's going to be at least 2 or 3 years away with respect to real estate at the soonest. The Legion has a long history with pro soccer already, so we think it's the perfect place to start. I'm a big fan of developing partnerships, and then after 2 or 3 years evaluating and saying, how are we doing with this? What can we do to make this better, or does it make sense to try something a little bit different? We're very committed to the area, and we think Legion's a great place for us to start out.
But you're looking to go someplace else in a couple of years?
Yes, someplace in the area.
In Wilmington?
Yeah.
In Wilmington, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Waddell?
Yeah, great presentation. I know, Mr. Mumford, I've seen it a few times, and just continues to get honed down, and it's all well and good. With regards, a little bit of follow-up on what the actual ask is for the city. So you would lease the property at a market rate? That's what you're proposing?
Yeah, we'd like to lease the stadium we've already actually received lease agreements for that.
And that includes the additional property that you would be upfitting?
Yeah, we're open to having a conversation about that back area, realizing that we'll have to discuss what those rates are, just because for us to kind of make the pro team work, we really need to make this food hall work.
Sure. Yeah, my issue is having if we were to do some sort of wildly reduced rental rate to you on a speculative venture, which I'm sure would work well, but, you know, the taxpayer is essentially footing the bill for this speculative venture. And then on top of that, you'd be able to put this food hall that has beer and food and all that, which, while again, would be fun, there's other competing businesses that are having to pay market rate leases on their property. So I think that's worth looking into from the city standpoint about what our appetite would be to just allow a reduced market rate lease on some property and what the reverberating effects of the community would be on that.
Completely understandable on that. We'd love for those local businesses, local restaurants to help us in the $10 million fundraise as well, and we could all benefit from that,
And then the other question was the 72 yards wide pro requirement. Is Legion width sufficient now, or will that require some significant upfit to make that happen?
Thankfully, we kind of double and triple checked yesterday.
Okay.
That is not the case.
So it's just essentially a returfing or
That's right. The lines, and again, we would recommend the non-permanent paint markings, really, I think, to the benefit of all the sports, because at this point with the technologies, you can take them up and down fairly easily.
And then with regards to the locker room improvements, that's an ask of the city?
That's right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Real quick, if we were, I guess going back to Tony's point, and I know our city interim attorney is going to be looking at that, if you were not able to secure the food hall at the fire tower, would you still bring the soccer team here, or would that be tied together?
Yeah, I think that, I don't think we could close the investor pool if that's the case, because the economics just don't make sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, on the food hall and the fire tower, that would be one aspect of the business plan. The other aspect would be somebody sponsoring sponsorships.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I guess looking at the model here and looking at the businesses that are here and looking what the Hammerheads did years ago with sponsorships, where do you think you could, or if let's just say if you were not able to obtain enough sponsorships, but you were able to get the food hall concept, could you still go forward with the project?
Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of recap with the pro team, our most important revenue stream would be the food hall, and then secondarily ticketing, and then sponsorships, merchandise, and then some ancillary things. And you know, we have a very realistic view of what sponsorship opportunities are in Wilmington. We're very clear-eyed about that, just because, you know, we are where we are. But honestly speaking, we're so excited about the ticketing elements as with respect to the strong partnership we've dealt with the youth club, as well as we think we can do a real good job on the merchandising, because Wilmington's not a hard place to sell when it comes to that sense of place. So we will be very activist in our merchandising.
Okay, and then the last question I have is, since we do have a coastal plain league that plays baseball out there, and on some nights you can get 1,300 people out at those games, depending on what they're offering and what's happening out there, would your games coincide with their games based on, you know, looking at what the parking facilities can accommodate out there? Obviously, this is not a place like downtown where you can park in a parking deck and walk. There you have to usually drive, so.
Yeah. We regarded the Wilmington Sharks as an important stakeholder. We've been in touch with Matt Perry almost on a weekly basis to work out some of the logistics, and we would at nearly all costs try to avoid any scheduling conflicts, because it's not good for parking, it's not good for the Sharks, and it wouldn't be good for the professional team that evening.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks for your presentation. I guess I certainly think we should continue to look at this. My biggest concern, and I used to serve on the Legion Stadium Commission, and I think, unfortunately, I think their chair is not here today because he's out of town on business. My biggest concern is, to sort of follow up on what Mr. Waddell said, if we invest taxpayer money and we supplement, subsidize really your operation. And then you very clearly said that in 2 years they're certainly movable, and so obviously you're not even planning to stay there. I think that's a big concern, that already you see down in the calendar that in 2 years from now you'd pick the things up with a crane and move them somewhere.
Yeah.
And you know, while the city owns Legion Stadium, it is a partnership between the county, the school board, and the city. So I think for us sitting up here, we need to know more about what the commission itself thinks about all of this, and to sort of iron out some of these things. That's my concern, is that we would use taxpayer money to subsidize what you want, and I get that we would get a team, and that would be great. But the concern is then we would make that investment, and then you would pick up and leave, and if you did that, then with the team leave, then we would have made a poor investment.
Right. I think those are all outstanding points, and I want to reiterate, we're very collaborativist in nature, because to pull something like this off, it really takes a community to make it happen. You know, I think that some of the impressions we got initially was a 2 or 3 years might be too long rather than that. So I think the reality is that the darn thing is we have to have more money come in than go out. And if we can work towards more money coming in than going out, then I'm a big fan of don't fix something if it ain't broke. I will say that our investment asks for locker rooms are, I think, maybe a few $1,000s, and I'll leave it to the experts to really determine what that is. The space that's being currently utilized is to park excess equipment at this point. So I feel like the ask that we're making from the city is commensurate to, there's a lot of upside to bringing a pro team back, bringing that community, hopefully pushing up tax revenues and helping those real estate values surrounding it. But, you know, this doggone thing about more money coming in than going out. So I really think we have some opportunities given the number of people that showed up for the old Wilmington Hammerheads pro team. This isn't a startup, it's a restart up, and we're really excited about that. So I think we should continue to have conversations about that and see. We should also figure out what the exact dollar figure is, just to put everybody with peace of mind.
So are you saying that if it's financially viable that you would stay?
I think,
I mean,
yes.
because it sounds...
Yes, if we have an opportunity to, you know, the challenging thing about sports franchises is you have to take a 10 or 15-year view. It's more like real estate than it is a restaurant business. And we have to find a certain set of investors that are committed to really the community. They're buying into the idea that this is where I want to put my money for the long term. So we just have to make sure that, you know, to the sponsorships question, we have to answer things like that. The ticketing works out. But if we can make Legion work, we'll make Legion work. But, you know, I've been doing startups since 1998. And, you know, you do your best guess, and you commit to the process, and then you make adjustments along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I'm going a different direction. I want to ask about job creation.
Okay.
How many possible jobs do you think you'll create by creating this venture? And also, if you're talking about a professional sport, what salary range are you looking at for your professional player?
That's a great question. So I'll start with the second one first. There is a new CBA for the third division professional soccer, and it basically guarantees about $25,000 a year, $25,000 to $30,000 a year, which, if housing is usually covered, you know, is third division soccer is kind of where it is with respect to tickets and local communities. So that was just enacted for this first season. The second element in terms of jobs creation, you know, what we can do at a later date is share what's happened in other cities on this, but you know, I'm not someone to overpromise and underdeliver, but you know, I think we're looking at 15 to 20 permanent jobs and anywhere from 60 to 80 temporary jobs on game days and things like that. My longer term hope is to, I've been teaching entrepreneurship for a decade. I've taught over 45 classes in entrepreneurship, and I've worked with the Golden Leaf Foundation on helping low resource folks start businesses. So I want to use this as a venue for people to pilot their ideas. And the easiest way to pilot ideas is to get your idea in front of a bunch of people. And I think this location is going to bring in folks because people are going to want to bring their families on a Saturday and Sunday. So I am very personally committed to the idea of helping folks in the arts as well as music and sports in general on really helping them realize the best version of themselves. I mean, that's kind of my personal operating model right now, and I'm going to stick with it because it's done me pretty good since at least the 1980s when I was growing up in North Carolina.
And one more question. Now, for those 20 to 30 and those 60 to 80 temporary jobs that you'll create on game days, what's your pay rate? Because, you know, you talked about housing for players, and, you know, we're definitely in the middle of a housing crisis, and you need $18 an hour to survive in these beautiful Wilmington streets.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can commit to a specific dollar figure, but I've been doing startups since 1998, and I think the most common mistake folks do is to try to hire employees on the cheap, because that turnover is going to do what really does you in. So we want to keep folks around as long as possible, and I know in the startups that I do, I'm a big fan of overpaying to avoid that turnover, because we want to completely change the game day experience in minor league soccer, because that's my other day job. Is I do research in sports entrepreneurship. I have a book coming out called Sports Entrepreneurship Beyond the Big Leagues in May that Columbia Business School Press is publishing. So I want to take all those best practices that I've been researching for the last 4 or 5 years and figure out how do we apply that to Wilmington, because Wilmington's going to be different than other markets. But if we understand the local flourishes, I like our chances on taking best practices and making them Wilmington specific. So I'm sorry I can't give you a specific dollar figure, but I'm a big fan of having familiar faces that I know that can get the work done. And that's not cheap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned some dates, like you mentioned May, and the dates that, are we talking about May 23, or are we talking about May 24?
So we would like to start playing or preseason in February of 24, with the first game in April of 24. And we need to have some clear understanding what the constraints are by May 31st, because we need to basically have our investors all on board. We're looking U.S. Soccer, we're looking y'all in the eyes and saying, we're doing this. Honestly, if that doesn't happen, we're going to push off a year, because one of the things about being successful in startups is being authentic, being agile, and being absolutely relentless. And we're really committed to bringing pro soccer to Wilmington.
So, Tony, you mentioned something about that date. Is that, I mean, legally, are we, I mean, that's like, what, 2 months away?
Yes, sir. We would do everything in our power, if council wants us to pursue this, we do everything in our power to try to meet those deadlines and get that information back, not only to the applicant, but to council.
We'll go Charlie, and then I'm gonna go Lou.
You mentioned that you've marched this out in other places, or you've been doing this since 1998.
Well, the league, there are over 50 or so teams already.
Okay.
And then as far as myself, as I've been doing startups since 1998.
Okay. Have you gone into a situation similar to what we have here today with we owning the stadium and what have you, and marched out your plan? Have you done this before?
No.
Okay.
There are not many people that have, frankly, maybe
I was just,
10
the reason
or
for my
15
question, I was
people.
just curious as how that particular municipality or agency handled it.
Right, and I will tell you, the league is very supportive of this, so we can draw off best practices on those municipal collaborations.
I'm sorry, Mr. Waddell.
I seem to remember that there were some stipulations from the state with regards to the utilization of Legion Stadium by anything other than school programs. That because of the grant that was given to the city to own Legion Stadium, that's going to be kind of difficult for you to operate.
Right.
And that may be the reason for the truncated timeline for like the 2 to 3 year sunset for then you to move on to your, final destination. But
Yeah, I mean,
can you speak to that at all? I mean, those are pretty significant issues potentially, right?
yeah, there are, and, I'd actually defer to the Parks and Rec director and as well as legal counsel for that, but those were concerns that we had as well that we weren't aware of in the beginning. But in our course of conversations, we've talked through lease agreements. We've seen lease agreements for the stadium. We've gone back and forth a fair bit. So I would, yes, and what you just advocated is let's take a look at that and make sure we have that all buttoned up. And that could be why that time frame is where things kind of ended up.
Okay.
Thank you.
If we could back up for a second to where you mentioned the supporting entrepreneurship, which obviously is your expertise. Tell us, we have in the past, for many years, invested in supporting entrepreneurship locally. And would you just tell me a little bit about how you would do that? Would it be something obviously more than just people setting up basically food trucks?
Sure.
How you would do that? Is it just musicians and what? Help me
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it as short as possible because I could talk about this for hours. I absolutely love this because it really helps change people's life and family trajectories. So I'm going to draw from my experiences in Nash and Edgecombe County. Several years ago, they asked me to come and help develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem. The Golden Leaf Foundation thought that was important enough to invest in it for several years, even though they typically only fund things for 1 year. But the idea is that when you're developing these ecosystems, number one is you don't need to reinvent any wheels because entrepreneur education is already hard enough. So I'm a huge fan of identifying folks that are already doing things in market. And then really what I find in almost every situation is the dots aren't being connected. And sometimes it's personalities. Sometimes it's lack of resources. So what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll do an inventorying of the entrepreneurial assets that exist. And then really what we concluded in Rocky Mount is that folks needed short programs. Entrepreneurs are just-in-time learners. They're not going to read books for the most part. So it's very experiential in nature. So we do these 4-week programs where there's another city in eastern North Carolina I can't disclose yet that I'm working on a project, but the idea is we're raising some money from the state if they finish a program, we like what they see, we'll give them a $1,000 grant to help grow. If they do another program, we'll look to give them a $5,000 grant with the idea that as much as people pull themselves up from their bootstraps, you still need capital to grow businesses.
Where would you do this?
Well, this location, it's being finalized now, so I can't get into the specific location, but it's in eastern North Carolina.
No. I'm not asking that. I
Okay,
mean, where would
sure.
you do that here at Legion Stadium? I mean, you're not going to do it in a food truck.
So with respect to Legion Stadium in particular, number one is, would be tying in with the culinary institutes and in the community colleges and saying, hey, let us know who some of your best students are. With the idea of, once we get to know some of those folks, I'd like to have one or two of the containers be really geared towards allowing someone that's been able to build a following from the local culinary institute, where they could make a strong case for if they had the location, because we're buying the containers. We're taking most of the capital risk. So we want to give an opportunity for these food restaurateurs to grow their business without having to put down $500,000 or $800,000 for a restaurant.
So it's entrepreneurship in food service.
In food service, with musicians and artists, I'd like to figure out a way where we could provide some sort of hybrid solution online as well as in-person elements on what does it take to be successful as a artist. I currently facilitate a accelerator in Winston-Salem called the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. I've been doing that for several years. We've had a lot of success there. Winston-Salem has been very supportive of that endeavor because the arts, creative industries don't tend to get a lot of support entrepreneurially. They've just been outstanding to work with, and I've been doing that for several years as their chief facilitator.
Is that a private enterprise, or it's also government-backed financially?
It's a combination. It's a public-private partnership. I can send you the details for it, but it's the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship.
I'd be curious.
Yeah, Margaret Collins is the executive director. I'd be happy to put you in touch with her.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate y'all's time.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Next, Tony.
Mayor, we now have a staff presentation on electric vehicle life cycle.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
To follow up on some questions that we received from council regarding transition to electric vehicles, we're here to try and provide with you the results of some research that we've done. Excuse me. So we're going to talk a little bit about EV ownership when it comes to what does it take to actually create the electric vehicle and the battery that goes with it, impacts of owning it, comparison of that between that and an internal combustion engine vehicle, as well as what happens to the vehicle and the battery after it's owned. It's important to remember why we're even talking about these questions. There's a list here of the resolutions that this council has passed since going back to 2006. Most notably, 2009, Wilmington adopted a goal for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And then again in 2021, adopted a resolution for clean energy goals and fleet electrification goals for both 2035 and 2050.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir, Mr. Waddell.
In 2022, this council unanimously approved a resolution as well. Is there any reason that's not listed on here?
Probably not, other than it may have been overlooked in creating this. I apologize.
I know it diverted originally from what was proposed, and I just want to make sure that that's listed on whatever the final presentation is.
Sure. Is it in reference to the Duke Energy letter?
It is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Completely inadvertent on my fault. In terms of EV life cycle before ownership, electric vehicle production, the production of the battery does require quite a bit significant more precious minerals than an internal combustion engine vehicle. Those minerals are critical to both the battery performance, longevity of the battery, as well as the energy density within the battery. This graph does not represent the minerals associated with the general frame. Those would be considered to cancel each other out between the two vehicles. And certainly transitioning into a more electric vehicle marketplace, there's going to be more demand for these vehicles, minerals. However, there is a pretty clear advantage when it comes to transitioning to EVs. The total life cycle greenhouse gas emissions are about half that of internal combustion engine vehicles. Most of those emissions come from the actual operation of the vehicle. If you look at these graphs to the side, the blue at the bottom represents the actual cost. The green represents the emissions associated with the production of batteries. The orange represents the amount of electricity that's used in the life cycle of the vehicle, whereas the yellow represents the emissions from the use of either gasoline or diesel. It's also important to remember that there's advancements when it comes to electric vehicle battery production. There are new technologies that are being developed constantly, ones that will reduce the reliance on some of these precious minerals, requiring no nickel or no cobalt, for instance, and also movement towards more solid-state batteries in exchange for batteries that contain either a liquid or a gel-type material for their transition. There's also a significant amount of investment in terms of new U.S.-based extraction and processing. Department of Energy is releasing grants, significant amount of grants to build these U.S.-based facilities. In North Carolina specifically, DOE has awarded $290 million to two North Carolina-based companies, the Albemarle Corporation outside of Charlotte and Piedmont Lithium in Belmont, to develop these plants for both extraction and processing. If you're so inclined to learn a little bit more about the Albemarle Corporation, Squeaky Clean Energy Podcast, episode number 85, hosts the president of that corporation. It's very interesting, goes into a lot of the technical aspects of what they do in terms of lithium processing. Moving on to EV life cycle during ownership, a few comparisons for you. In terms of smaller type vehicle, a Chevy Bolt compared to a Toyota Corolla, the lifetime greenhouse gas emission reduction of 45 tons of CO2 with a 6.4 total ownership reduction and 6.4% total ownership reduction in terms of cost. The graphs over to the side, of note, the blue at the very bottom represents the initial purchase price, which obviously shows that EVs are typically more expensive at this point. But in the next two bars up, the red and I believe that's purple, forgive my color blindness, but the red represents the fuel, either gasoline or in case of EVs, it's electricity. And then also maintenance and repairs. Electric vehicles have significantly less number of parts, which require much less maintenance. Moving up in size, comparison of a Volkswagen ID4 versus a Honda CR-V, total lifetime GHG emission reduction of 56 tons of CO2 with a 15.6% less cost of ownership. Probably our most important comparison, the F-150 pickup truck versus the Lightning F-150. The city owns quite a few pickups in what we do on a daily basis. lifetime emission reduction of 74 tons of CO2 with a total cost of ownership reduction of 17.1%. A few additional considerations in terms of emission reduction versus total cost of ownership. They'll become even more favorable as when the grid cleans up, as more renewables get added to the grid, it will further help us reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. EV costs will continue to decline as that battery technology improves and the reliance on those precious minerals are reduced. And also, when you factor in federal tax incentives and rebates, that can also help with the long-term cost of these vehicles. So after ownership, what happens to the old batteries from electric vehicles? First, they have a pretty long lifespan, between 100 and 200,000 miles, 15 to 20 years. You're only losing about 2% of the capacity in general on an annual basis, and they're going to offer typically a fairly substantial warranty when it comes to that battery. Second, once the battery's done in the vehicle, we can reuse it. There's ways that batteries can be reused and repurposed before they're actually either disposed or recycled. And lastly, those precious minerals are important. They were costly to get out of the ground, so we want to make sure we put them to good use. And so there's a lot of investment in recycling of those batteries. So battery reuse, primary use for repurposed EV batteries is for energy storage. Picture in the background represents a solar farm that's out in California. The units that are in front of that represent battery packs and storage containers that were sourced from both Nissan and Honda. And this is essentially a storage facility. So they store about 25 megawatts of electricity in the battery packs at this location. They use that to help back up the grid when necessary. Finally, at the end of life, when the battery has dropped in capacity enough, they're going to look to recycle that battery. There are new companies that are starting up. Redwood Materials is an EV battery recycling company. It's got partnerships with both VW, Audi, and Panasonic. They're developing a facility just to the south of us down in Charleston. Li-Cycle is also an EV battery facility with different facilities located around the country. Both of those companies can recycle about 30,000 tons of batteries per year at this point. And that's at a very high recovery rate for these materials, for all the minerals. There's also a pretty significant interest from the federal government in terms of EV battery recycling. The federal government has issued a request for information to guide a significant amount of money in terms of programs for both collection, transportation, sorting, processing, and adding second life to application of these EV batteries. And it's not just the electric vehicle batteries, but it's also the batteries in your phone as well. There's quite a bit of precious minerals and what we carry around in our pockets every day. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions.
Well, just a question is, how many electric vehicles do we currently have?
Currently, we don't have any. We have a fleet of probably 20, maybe 25 hybrids, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah.
Okay. And when we have any kind of a problem, or if we have a problem, are they maintained there at the fleet facility there on River Road, or do we have to send them back to the dealership?
I would say most of the maintenance gets done right here at the City Operations Complex.
So our guys can work on those batteries and whatever needs to be taken care of over there. And then have we disposed of any of those hybrid vehicles as of yet?
I'm sure we've surplus them. We would typically surplus them through the eGov auction site.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask, I know that the biggest pollutant of greenhouse gases is the diesel, and the diesel trash trucks and all the stuff that we use on diesel. And I know that some of it we can't just replace. And I know there was a discussion at one time about getting that Volkswagen court case that was settled here in the state. And we were going to use some of that money for a electric trash truck or compactor. Did that go anywhere, or did we lose it?
Unfortunately, the grant was, it wasn't a VW settlement grant. It was a different grant, and I'm losing the name of that grant right off the top of my head. But yes, the vendor that was that we were working with at the time was unable to produce. This was going through COVID, so there was labor issues, there was supply issues, and they just couldn't produce the product that we were looking for at the time. So we had to give up on that particular grant. But we'll, of course, we'll be looking for additional grants as we progress through that. Trash trucks, in particular, are pretty important to the whole equation. While we own about 30-ish trash trucks that we use on a regular basis, and they are, because of the amount of diesel that they use, they're going to be an important part of our ability to meet those fleet electrification goals.
Okay, very good. Mr. Rivenbark.
Dave, what website or whatever did you get your information from on this to put this presentation together?
Well, there's quite a few.
Would you send those to me?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Dave. Last but not least.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to close with some good news this morning. I'm going to ask Aubrey Parsley to come forward and give us an update on the sale of the castle property.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Two reasons for the brief update this morning. One is the city manager just mentioned, wanted to provide you all with the update on how the bid results came in for the sale of 1110 Castle Street, which was put up for sale by a process known as sealed bid. And then I also thought it'd be helpful to review what our process looked like for Castle Street, as we potentially may be having some other surplus property sales coming up. This would be helpful to sort of wrap everybody's mind around what kind of timeline it takes to transition properties from city inventory over back to the private sector. So this is the timeline that I actually presented to council back in July when council voted to approve the sale of this property by sealed bid. So that's the 722 up there. In August, we put a contract up for council vote that required, or that asked council to approve the contractor for the demolition. And then in September, the demolition and asbestos abatement began. We had to go through permitting approval processes. The site work didn't actually pick up until November, with demolition being complete right at that end of November, beginning December timeframe. And once that work was done, we went about publishing a notice of sealed bid sale in the newspaper, which is something that is required by the general statute. You have to advertise the sealed bid sale in a newspaper of general circulation. We let that run for 30 days. We didn't actually put the bid package for the property out until January of this year, and then we let that run for about 60 days. Bids were due on March 9th. We ended up receiving 2 bids for the property. The first bid was from Genesis Block. They bid $10,000 on the property. The second bid was from PBW Development, LLC. They bid $867,500 for the property, which made them the high bidder for this sealed bid sale. So this is not an item that is coming to you tomorrow night. It'll appear on the agenda for April 4th. And if that resolution is accepted by council, the sale would be scheduled to close within 30 days, which would put the closing in May of this year. And that is all I have for you. Any questions? Have to take the highest or reject them all. Those are the 2 options.
All right. There's no other questions?
Mr. Mayor, just one quick reminder, the Governance Committee will meet after this meeting across the street in the Training Center Annex.
Okay.
No
With that,
closed
Thank you.
sessions.
okay. With that, thank you for taking interest. Stand adjourned.